Good morning, Americans. This is your favorite alien and Bubba here on the morning of Sunday, November 29th, 2020. Sitting in for Paul Harvey this morning. Stand by for the rest of the story. Well, Americans, this story is concerning today, but it's an old story. I'll redo it again. Because of the situation that we're in with the virus and the different discords and the election that we just finished, and the heavy air of distrust, dishonesty, and racial discourse that's going on in this country, I figured this story should be apropos. So, sitting in for Paul Harvey this morning, here's the rest of the story. Well, Americans, it was a hot July Sunday in New York City in 1854. The times were like they are today. You had the threat of the Civil War coming. The discourse was all over the place, north or south. And New York City was a very segregated city at the time in 1854. And there was this nice lady. She was the organist at the regular Methodist church here in New York City. And at the time, you had two modes of transportation. You had what they called the streetcar, which was a car pulled by a horse, and a regular streetcar and rails. What you call today, you would call it a monorail system or train system, did not appear until 1869. So the lady, Miss Elizabeth Jennings, and her friend were going late to church, so they decided to take the streetcar. So she got up on the streetcar with her friend, and the conductor looked at her, pointed at the sign, "No coloreds allowed to ride," because the streetcars were privately owned companies that New York City had contracted to deliver people, and they could do as they see fit. Well, Miss Jennings held her ground, and the conductor went over there, and after a little altercation, physically threw her down. Her friend decided that she wasn't going to take the fate, and she got down. Well, the conductor went back to his thing, told the driver, "Get ready to go." And they got going. He turned around, and lo and behold, Miss Jennings had dusted herself up, and in the streetcar she was. Well, he just told the driver, "Keep on going. If you see a policeman, stop." So the driver kept on going, and he finally saw a policeman. Policeman came out and physically hoisted Miss Jennings out of the car and battered her. I mean, literally. Because you remember, in those days, whether you were white or black, women were battered by police, big time. You guys that saw the suffragettes being blasted in all these cities, New York, Washington, and every city that they were in the 19th and early 20th century, you know that the police were bad. So you can't say police brutality is just for African Americans. It had women too, big time in those days. Well, as it turned out, Miss Jennings was a very prominent, her family was a little prominent in the African American and some aspects of white community in New York City. Her father was an inventor, and they were friends with Frederick Douglass. He decided to put it on his newspaper, and it went nationwide at the time. Whew, can you imagine the furor that cost? Even with white people, seeing a black colored lady being mistreated by a police officer in New York City. "Hello, NYPD, yoo-hoo!" Yeah. Well, that happened. And this white law firm, decided to represent her against her suit against the Third Avenue Rail Company, the conductor, and the city. She was represented by the junior partner of this law firm. He was a 24-year-old upstart kid. And of course, the jury was all men in white. So the odds that they gave her was, big time. Well, she won the case in 1855. Her attorney was pretty good. And the city awarded her $250, about $6,000 to $10,000 in today's money, 2020 money, and punitive damages of $25, which was a lot of money in those days. But $250, whoo, can you imagine that? Well, the Third Avenue Railroad Company decided to desegregate the next day. It took the rest of the rail companies in the New York City to 1869 before they finally decided to desegregate. Now, the 24-year upstart attorney that represented her in this case and won, his name was Chester Alan Arthur, future President of the United States, on the death of James Garfield in 1881. Miss Jennings married a guy named Mr. Graham. Unfortunately, they had some riots in the 1860s in New York City, so they had to move to New Jersey for a little bit. He died there in 1867. She moved back to New York sometime between 1869 and 1872 and lived the remainder of their years in New York City. She also established a school for African Americans, kindergarten school, which she ran until her death in 1901. And you thought you knew the rest of the story. Well, the rest of the story is that African Americans, you completely forgot about her. Sure that Rosa Parks had her, and she should have her day in the limelight. But how about Miss Elizabeth Jennings? What about her? It has taken until 2020 before somebody in New York City has looked her up and said, hey, we had a Rosa Parks way before Rosa Parks, 101 years before. So now you know the rest of the story. This is your favorite alien and Bubba, sitting in for Paul Harvey. Good day.